Okay, hi everyone. I'm just checking that you are seeing the screen. Yep. Okay, welcome to week 8. Hope you've all had a nice break, or you're probably still on break while you're doing this. And today we're going to look at false allegations and confessions. We're going to look at being accused of committing a crime you didn't commit. And these are mainly allegations of child sex abuse. And then in the second half, why on earth would you confess to a crime that you did not commit? So let's get going. Come on, next screen. There we go. We are going to talk about some material that could be quite distressing today. So just a reminder again of the counselling services that are available on both campuses. Please make sure that you use them if you need to. So our learning objectives for this week is about understanding the main areas of false allegations and how they can be improved. False allegations can often be about quite extreme behaviour such as bestiality or having sex with animals. And this can also relate to memory, especially repressed memory related to childhood incidents that can be brought back through therapy or hypnosis. They then say that they are remembering things from their childhood that didn't really happen. So memory is not objective or photographic, but very subjective. And those of you who saw the TED Talk with Elizabeth Loftus a couple of weeks ago, in week 6 when we did eyewitness testimony, she did discuss this about repressed memory in that TED Talk. If you didn't watch it, please make the time to go back. We're going to understand the psychology of confessions and distinguish about how false confessions can be induced. This means getting someone to believe that they did something that they didn't and inducing a false confession. So what's the psychology behind that? The types of false confessions and the factors associated. Now we've got quite a few case studies this week, so please make sure that you listen in and watch the videos as they come up. So false allegations can be repressed memory, and we're going to look at a case study there. And false confessions, that's what we're going to be looking at there, also with a case study. All right, let's start with false allegations. Why are some people accused of crimes they did not commit? So this is Claude Ray Spencer. He actually served 20 years in prison for allegedly sexually abusing his 2 children. The charges were dismissed in 2010 and he's been a free man since then. And if you watch that little video that's attached there, it'll give you an update and show you what happened when the children eventually came forward and said that he hadn't actually touched them at all. So false allegations often involve allegations of extreme sexual abuse. His daughter made allegations that he had molested her when she was 5. He was subsequently charged with sexually abusing her, a 9-year-old brother and his 5-year-old stepson. In February 1985, he pled guilty to 7 counts of first-degree statutory rape and 4 counts of complicity to statutory rape, arising from allegations that he made the children perform sex acts with each other as he watched. He was sentenced to 2 life terms plus 14 years. He pleaded guilty after finding out his defence attorney had not prepared a defence for the case. He was denied parole 5 times because he would not admit guilt and get sex offender treatment. Oh, and by the way, he was a serving police officer. Eventually, he got a good lawyer who hired a private investigator, and they discovered that there was no medical evidence whatsoever of any inappropriate touching of the children, let alone the repeated rapes that his ex-wife had alleged to authorities. Also withheld at the time was that the investigating detective was involved in an affair with the mother of his children. In 2004, a judge commuted his sentence, although he was placed under supervision. His son said he only admitted the abuse to the police so they would leave him alone. His daughter can't remember talking to the police except that she got ice cream. The stepson is maintaining he was molested. In February 2014, he was awarded $9 million in damages. The whole case was built around the children's testimony. There was no physical evidence. And there is a documentary that you can watch on YouTube that clearly shows the mother trying to tell the children what to say. So remember, we've talked about the fact that as witnesses, children are very vulnerable and open to suggestion. The mother was only supposed to be there as a support person, but she was interfering far too much in the questioning. So when we did eyewitness testimony, we heard about the value of the jury hearing from an eyewitness. So if the jury hears a witness telling a story of being abused by someone, that can be really quite compelling. So the main areas of false allegations are professional reports of child physical and sexual abuse, mandatory reporting of suspected abuse, and those markers of possible abuse. So this needs to continue to ensure that kids are protected. But what if the professional does not know the markers of abuse? If a child is seeing them for some issue and they are told the child is wetting the bed, this can be a sign of sexual abuse, but it can also be a sign of a weak bladder. So the clinician needs to be careful in their reporting. It is up to the police to investigate. So false allegations of sexual abuse against a conflicting parent in a divorce case, especially when there are child custody disputes, and repressed memories, which we're going to talk about a lot more. Repressed memories and false memories. And the consequences that we just saw with Clyde can be really serious, regardless of how they come about. But the areas of false allegations are from professionals who see signs or indicators of abuse in children and then are coming forward and reporting it. And sometimes they're reporting nothing more than a child with a weak bladder. So false allegations seem common in allegations of sexual abuse because in many cases there is no physical evidence, particularly if they're now adults and are having flashbacks or coming forward after a very long time. There's no physical evidence. So it makes it really, really difficult. Evidence often comes from relatively young children. Young kids don't have the language to talk about what's happening to them. I've seen this firsthand just recently in a child who was neglected in some cases in a little bit by his stepmother. And because he didn't have the language to say that that was what was happening, it wasn't known. And he's fine, but children don't have the language and they can be very vulnerable and suggestible to giving them information that is false. And professionals are really sensitive about the dangers of abuse and feel that it is important to protect children. So therefore they may overestimate and over-report. And we saw that before, earlier in the course, with professionals who may overestimate and over-report to save themselves from litigation. All right, so we're going to talk here. Oh, before we go on to talk about repressed memory, this is a case study that happened in Sydney last year. So this man who had a job, he was married, he had a child, helped a young woman at a service station fixing her broken down car for about 2 hours. He then followed her part of the way home just to make sure her car didn't break down again. Now, a lot of this was captured on CCTV. If you please watch the YouTube story and you'll see it. She then went to the police and accused him of indecently assaulting and stalking her and asking for sexual favours for fixing her car. He lost his job, his wife left him, and he was put into prison, with the police describing his behaviour as predatory. After further investigation, she confessed that he had not done anything wrong, but exactly what he had said. Helped her for a couple of hours to fix her broken car and made sure she got home. So he was then released and she received a 9-month jail sentence with a non-parole period of 5 months. He's now suing her and the New South Wales Police and has been unable to return to work due to the psychological distress of the ordeal. So you can see that it's very, very easy for people to make false allegations and be believed. All right, repressed memory. These are memories that have been unconsciously blocked. So repressed memories are those that are blocked from entering our awareness. They're blocked unconsciously for a period of time, usually due to a traumatic experience. So these people will say they're having a recollection of what happened to them as a child. It is hugely controversial. Clinical psychologists, some believe that it is possible to have repressed memories, but sometimes these same clinical psychologists treat these people in such a way that they make a suggestion to them and bring out a memory that is false. They are most often largely related to child sexual abuse. And some practitioners, such as clinical psychologists, have suggested that they're reliable evidence of child sexual abuse. This became a really, really big thing when I was growing up, because I can remember my father saying to me as an adult that he was worried that someone would get hold of me and put these memories into me about him touching me in some way, which he never ever did. If he did, I don't know about it, but he never did. Okay, and there were a lot of girls who were coming out and accusing their fathers of having touched them inappropriately, and it caused a lot of issues in a lot of families. So the problem with acceptance is how they come to be retrieved. Retrieval is actually a bigger issue with the repressed memories. So it's usually done through therapy and sometimes hypnosis, which is especially true for child sexual abuse coming to the fore. So hypnosis is a state of suggestibility in deep relaxation. It's not like the stage shows where you cackle like a chicken. It's much different in a one-on-one session where the therapist has to be careful not to suggest things to the client. These clients are often vulnerable and susceptible to suggestion, especially children. It is really important to note that suggestion can play a huge role in a child saying that something has happened when it hasn't. We covered this earlier in the course, where even when challenged about the truth of what they are saying, small children will stick with the lie. So Loftus is simply saying that there is no clear empirical evidence that cognitively we repress the memories of what has happened to us as children. Unfortunately, though, other research states that 50% of judges, 73% of jurors, and 65% of police officers believe in repression, while only 22% of psychologists of a scientific orientation did. Okay, so when memories are recovered, their accuracy is questionable. How do we know this is an accurate memory? And again, Elizabeth Loftus, there's that name, she's all about the memory, no empirical evidence for repression. And the case study that we've got here is Holly Ramona. So Holly was seeking some counselling for anorexia and bulimia, and she joined a group therapy for women with bulimia, and some of these women had been sexually abused. So they sat around in their little circle and talked about their experiences, which included those talking about their sexual abuse. She started having flashbacks of her father sexually abusing her and engaging in bestiality. So these memories started to flash back to her. Okay. Holly was given sodium amytal, which is supposed to be truth serum, and recalled in greater detail the flashbacks and being raped by her father from age 5 to 16. And she's only 18 now, but has repressed these memories that happened between 5 and 16. She was under the care of a psychiatrist and psychologist who gave her the sodium amytal, and it's actually not true. There is no drug to make you tell the truth. What it will do is relax your inhibitions and might make you more chatty. And this is where she started to talk about the rapes and provide more information. Holly sued her father, and he sued the counsellor and psychiatrist. He was really, really angry with the therapist for giving her the truth serum because she had total faith in it and total faith that once she took it, whatever she said was the truth. He was successful, so he won the lawsuit challenging the treatment. But he asked for $8 million and got $500,000, which was $250 for lost wages in the past and the other half for the future. But he lost a $400,000 job 4 years before he was vindicated. So he really still did not come out ahead. And this was a landmark case in fighting these allegations. It did come out in court that they were not a happy family. His wife did divorce him, and his three daughters do not have contact with him. It doesn't say in the end whether he actually did do it or not, and there's nothing that I found to show that out of the three daughters, the other two never made any allegations against him at all. So this is what repressed memory is and how it's brought out. So now we're going to look at implanting false memories. Can you actually implant a false memory into someone? You can't just decide to implant memories into people about sexual abuse or bestiality, as you would never ever get ethical approval to do it. But this is one such study that was done that is much less harmful, again by Elizabeth Loftus, and this is called the Lost in the Mall study. So this demonstrates how easily childhood memories can be implanted. There is a video at the bottom that I will ask you to watch in a minute. So what they did was they asked the family members for information about the child from when they were growing up. You know, what are the memories that this child would have? And they planted a false memory in the child about being lost in the mall and not knowing where their parents were. They got the parents to sit down and talk to the child about their memories, such as Dreamworld or SeaWorld, and getting lost in the mall. And then they started to remember that it happened when it actually didn't. And when questioned, they provided an awful lot of detail about this memory that was actually a lot more than just getting lost in the mall. This study has been replicated numerous times with slight methodological differences, but similar studies suggest false memories can be implanted in between 20 and 40% of participants. Because, as Elizabeth Loftus says, memory is suggestive, it is subjective, and it is malleable. So we can suggest something, it's subjective what we remember, and it's malleable because we can make changes. And this is a really, really scary case study about Paul Ingram. Again, like the previous case, Paul Ingram was a 43-year-old police officer. He was accused by one daughter of sexual abuse. The second accused him of satanic ritual abuse. Then his son accused him of abuse also. The first daughter was 22 when she started having the flashbacks. But not only did she remember being raped, she remembered that he was part of a satanic cult where they have a ritual of murdering babies. She initially remembers 25 babies being murdered, but got up to remembering 200 plus babies being offered to Satan. She also stated that after one baby died, its arm was ripped off and inserted into her vagina. Her sister claimed that they had seen 800 satanic rituals. The allegations from the daughters were very similar to a book that had just been released, although they denied reading it even though it was in the house. Paul not only made full confessions, he also admitted to doing things to his children had not accused him of. It was believed this was due to him having false memories implanted inadvertently after being hypnotized by authority figures in his church. The children were either in or had been in therapy when the allegations arose. The daughters made accusations of sexual abuse against many other members of the community also, including many members of the police department. The allegations surfaced through the church from a member who found the oldest daughter sobbing in a corner and said that he was the one who opened the can of worms and all he knew was what the Lord told him. This was the third sexual abuse allegation the girl had made, but the first against her father. This happened in the 1970s when the term false memory syndrome did not exist. Paul was told during questioning that it was common for abusers to not remember having done anything wrong and that if he just confessed, the memories would return. He asked to see his pastor, who had been talking to the girls, and told him that it had happened and that he was evil. He even conducted an exorcism to try to rid him of the satanic demons. Scary stuff, eh? This case became very bizarre with allegations of murder, abortion, and satanic rituals. All the time, Paul just kept saying what the authorities wanted to hear, all the while confirming that he didn't think it had happened and he felt like he was making it up. Medical examinations found nothing to suggest the girls had had intercourse or abortions. He was sentenced to 20 years in prison and released in 2003. But it was interesting that Paul started to remember false things too. So Offshee, who conducted this experiment, started to doubt all this happening, so went to visit Paul and planted a false memory of him making the children have sex with each other, which is not what the children had said. Ingram went away to his cell and came back the next day with a 3-page statement of how he did all this. Offshee was working for the prosecution and he gave it to the defence as proof of being able to implant false memories. In the interim, Ingram pleaded guilty and went to prison. Once all the questioning completed and he was left alone in prison, he realised that he had not done anything at all. So you can see how someone can become so overwhelmed that they will confess to crimes that they didn't commit by having these false memories implanted. But what about false memories in children? Because numerous studies have demonstrated that children are particularly susceptible to the implantation of false memories. Well, this is the Mr. Science experiment, and this is explained in depth in the textbook. So 2 in 5 preschool children recall fictional events as if real. So they spoke about the yucky thing in their mouth as if it were real. Originally, they thought this could be because the kids were very young, but they found out later that a lot of them stuck to it. So the story, the Mr. Science experiment. Children aged 3 to 4 were given a vivid science lesson by Mr. Science. Shortly afterwards, they were interviewed and asked to tell the interviewer everything about the lesson. They were extremely accurate and very few made false claims. And of course, if this is being done in a preschool setting or in a daycare setting, Mr. Science would never at any stage be left alone with these children. There would have been teachers in the room as well. 3 months later, their parents were sent a storybook to read to the children. It contained information about the science lesson that was blatantly false, such as being touched by Mr. Science, who then put a yucky object into their mouth. This was interspersed with factual information and told to the children 3 times. The children then had another interview session in which open-ended and then leading questions were asked about whether the events were real or just from one of the stories. The results were that 2 out of 5 children spoke of the events that had originated in the stories as if they were real. Leading questions increased that rate. Over half answered yes to being asked if something yucky had been put into their mouth. That's a leading question, not saying to them, did anything unusual happen, but leading them specifically to the answer by saying, was something yucky put into your mouth? Quite severe challenges were made to the children about the truth of what they said, but even then the majority of them continued to maintain that Mr. Science had put something yucky into their mouth. Increasing the age from 3 to 8 years did not result in a lessening of false reports, which remained stable if free recall conditions, where they just asked the children to just tell the story of what happened. That's free recall. However, after being challenged, older children did recant the false allegations, younger children did not. Follow-up a month later revealed that 2/3 were still maintaining the false claims. So you need to be aware that children, right down to about the age of 3, are quite often called upon to talk about their experience in court. There are actually volunteers in Queensland who are trained in being like a support person for these very, very young children. But think about how easy it is to put an idea into their head that doesn't exist. So we're talking here about active suggestion and passive suggestion. So it's all about how susceptible the person is and how the suggestions are made to them. It's an active suggestion. Did Mr. Science put something yucky in your mouth? Whereas a passive suggestion is all about the state someone's in. So could they be open to suggestion of something that did not happen? And we're now going to talk about a case that is a very, very passive suggestion situation. This is part of the Washington shooter. So a sniper opens fire in a playground. 1 child died and several were injured. But many children were away that day. So children were away on school excursions. They were just not at school because they were sick or away on holiday. So those who were not there or involved developed the memories for themselves as if they were there. because they were exposed to so many people talking about it. So one boy started to talk about how he ran when the shooting started, even though he wasn't there. And this is passive suggestion. Authors said he created these memories as everyone was talking about it. It was on the news, so he incorporated it into his own experience. But what had happened to the memory about him being on holiday? Well, it could be to a young child like this that they're just able to shift it in time. So he might still remember being on vacation, but he'll just move it to another time or just say they can't remember when that happened. So yeah, I went away on holidays, but no, it wasn't on that day because I was there when the shooting occurred. Okay, so this is passive suggestion. The kids who weren't there just took it on as if they were there simply because of everyone talking about it around them and about it being on the news. How can we improve? How can we improve the accuracy? Well, children must be able to understand that the interviewer only wants them to recall events that happened to them themselves. And this is really important. Kids don't always have an understanding of what happens to them does not happen to someone else. So you've got to get them to understand we're only interested in their experience, not anyone else's experience. And know the source of their knowledge. What is the source of their knowledge? Where does it come from? So there are strategies for improving professional judgment. How can you figure out the differences between the truth and false allegation? Well, the indicators approach, this is the evidence distinguishing true and false reports. Evidence of what is there in a true or false report to allow them to be easily distinguished. What should the practitioner specifically be looking for to ensure the truth is accurate? And the standards approach, the best practice or rules of conduct for conducting investigations and assessments to avoid contamination of reports. Don't use the truth serum, and don't tell people everything they say is the truth and actually happened to them. Just let them tell their story. Okay, that ends part one. In the second part, we're going to discuss false confessions. We're going to move from false allegations to confessions and discuss why someone might admit to a crime or confess to a crime that they did not commit.